You know that moment when a friend asks you to do something totally random and you say yes before even thinking it through? Yeah, well, that's exactly how last Saturday started for me. And honestly, it's been on my mind all week. So here's the scene. I'm lounging on my beat-up couch, half watching some reruns on TV when my buddy Lucas barges in like he's on a mission. Lucas is that guy, super chill, always with a camera slung around his neck, but not in a professional photographer way. More like a hobbyist who's obsessed with capturing the little things that most people miss. He just got this new camera, one of those fancy mirrorless ones with all the bells and whistles, and he's been itching to try it out. Dude, you gotta help me, he says, sitting down next to me with a grin that's equal parts excitement and mischief. I need a model. You're it. Now I'm thinking, okay, no big deal. Lucas has taken some cool shots before, mostly landscapes or street stuff, nothing too weird. But then he pulls out this sleek black camera, holding it like it's some magic wand. His eyes are sparkling, and suddenly I realize this isn't just a casual snap-of-the-moment thing. He wants to do a whole shoot. I'm sitting there, still half in my sweatpants, hair messy from just rolling out of bed, and he's all, "Come on, man, we'll keep it chill. Just some quick shots." I want to test the lighting and see how it handles skin tones. Skin tones? On me? My brain is already running through every awkward possibility. But before I can protest, he's already setting up some random corners of my living room like it's a studio, pulling out these portable lights, adjusting curtains, and even asking me to move a plant for better composition. It's weird, honestly. I mean, I've known Lucas for years, since college, and we've been close friends through all sorts of messes and late-night talks, but I'd never thought of him seeing me as, well, more than the guy who's always down to binge-watch dumb shows or grab a pizza. The thing is, there's always been this low-key tension between us, something unspoken but there. Like when he laughs a little too long at my jokes or when I catch him staring just a bit longer than usual. I've never been sure if I was imagining it or if it was real. But now, here he is, shining lights on me, adjusting angles, telling me to turn my head slightly, and it all feels different. I look over at him, and there's this serious focus on his face, like he's not just trying to get a good shot, but he's trying to figure something out. And maybe I am too, because as much as I want to act casual about the whole thing, part of me wonders if this little photo session is more than just testing a new camera. It's awkward and thrilling all at once, and just as I'm starting to lean into it, getting a bit more comfortable in front of the lens, Lucas pauses and says, "Hold that pose." And then he says something I wasn't expecting. "You know, you've got a face that tells a story." I'm sitting there, mid-pose, and I can't help but wonder what story he thinks I'm telling. And if maybe, just maybe, it's the story he wants to be a part of. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be just any photo shoot. It was the start of something way more complicated and way more interesting than either of us planned. I blinked, caught mid-pose, and suddenly the room felt smaller, like the space between us was charged with something I hadn't quite named before. "A face that tells a story," Lucas repeated, his voice soft but steady, like he wasn't just talking about the photo anymore. I swallowed, trying to keep it casual, but my heart was doing this weird flutter thing. "What kind of story?" I asked, half joking, but also genuinely curious. He lowered the camera, the click of the lens cap snapping into place, breaking the tension. "I don't know, like the kind of story that's messy, but real. You know, not just some perfect postcard smile. You've got this depth. It's rare." I wasn't sure how to respond. Compliments from Lucas were few and far between, so this felt like a big deal. Plus, there was something else, something in the way he looked at me that made me think maybe he was seeing me differently than he used to. We sat there for a beat, the soft hum of the fan filling the silence. Then he laughed, the tension easing a bit. "Okay, enough of me being a pretentious artist. Want to grab a beer? I think I'm done torturing you with my camera for tonight." I nodded, grateful for the distraction, but also wishing this moment could stretch out longer. As we walked to the kitchen to grab some cold ones, I realized how weirdly nervous I felt. Like I was on the edge of something, but I wasn't sure if I was about to fall or fly. We cracked open the beers, the familiar hiss and clink grounding me. Lucas leaned against the counter, sipping slowly. You ever think about doing something like that? Modeling, I mean? Me? I smirked. Nah, I'm more of a behind-the-scenes guy. Plus, I have zero patience for standing still. He smiled, but there was a flicker in his eyes, like he was imagining something else entirely. You'd be surprised. Sometimes the best shots come from just being yourself. No pretending. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time I noticed the way his dark hair fell just a little over his forehead, the way his eyes caught the light at just the right angle. I'd always thought he was good looking, but now it felt like I'd never really seen him before. We ended up back on the couch, beers in hand, and that easy rhythm of friendship settling in again. But it wasn't quite the same. There was an undercurrent, something unspoken, threading between us. So, I said, breaking the silence, what made you want to try this whole photoshoot thing with me anyway? I mean, besides me being a reluctant model? Lucas shrugged, but he didn't look away. I don't know, I guess I wanted to capture something real. And you're the only one I trust to let me do that. His words hit me in a way I didn't expect. Trust. That's always been huge for us. Through everything. Crazy nights, bad decisions, heartbreaks, Lucas was the guy who stuck around. But this felt different. It felt like maybe he was offering me something more. I reached out, nudging his shoulder lightly. Well, I'm honored, man. You're lucky I'm so handsome. He laughed, but it was softer this time, like a secret between us. Later, when the beers were empty and the night had settled into something quiet, Lucas pulled out his phone and showed me a few shots from earlier. There I was, caught in different moods. Laughing, serious, even a little vulnerable. See, he said. I told you, you've got a story. I studied the photos, and for once, I didn't just see myself. I saw him too. The way he framed the shots, the way he caught moments I didn't know existed, and then he did something unexpected. He looked up, eyes meeting mine, and said, "Want to do this again sometime? Maybe somewhere else. No pressure. Just us and the camera." My chest tightened, my mind racing, because part of me wanted to say yes right away, to see where this could go. But another part of me was scared. Scared of what it might mean to cross the line from friends to something more. Still, I found myself nodding. Yeah, I'd like that. And just like that, the night shifted. What started as a simple photo shoot turned into the beginning of a story neither of us could have predicted. One told not just in pictures, but in glances, in touches, in moments caught between breath and silence. I didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. After that night, things between Lucas and me started to change in a way I hadn't quite anticipated. It was subtle at first. Little things that might have gone unnoticed if I wasn't paying such close attention. Like the way he'd brush his fingers against mine just a second longer than necessary when handing me a lens cap. Or how he'd text me pictures throughout the week. Not just of random stuff, but of me. Candid shots. Mostly my morning coffee, my messy desk, that ridiculous hat I wore when I was just goofing around. It was weird, but in a good way. Like suddenly I was seeing myself through his eyes. And maybe he was seeing something in me that I'd been missing. I found myself wanting to text him back quicker, to share more than I usually would. And when we met up again, the vibe was different. More electric, but also more comfortable, if that makes any sense. Our second shoot was at the park down the street from my place. It was a bright Sunday afternoon, the kind of day made for lazy walks and people watching. Lucas showed up with his camera bag slung over one shoulder, looking like he had a plan, but also ready to roll with whatever came. "You ready to be my muse again?" he teased, grinning. I rolled my eyes, but smiled. "Only if you promise not to make me do any weird poses," he laughed. No promises. We wandered through the park, stopping here and there, so he could snap a few shots. But mostly, we just talked. About dumb stuff, serious stuff, stuff we'd never said out loud before, like how Lucas had been feeling stuck lately, like his photography wasn't going anywhere, and how I'd been dealing with some work stress that was slowly eating at me. At one point, we sat on a bench near the pond, watching ducks paddle around lazily. Lucas was fiddling with his camera, and I caught him looking at me in this way that made my stomach twist. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, but didn't look away. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "About us," he said quietly. I froze. The ducks quacked. A dog barked in the distance, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat. "Us?" I echoed, trying to keep my voice steady. Lucas took a breath. "Yeah, I guess I've been wanting to say this for a while, but I wasn't sure how. I like you. Like, more than just friends." Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I wanted to say a million things, but none of them seemed to come out right. Because the truth was, I felt the same way. I had for a while, but I was scared to mess things up, scared of losing what we already had. Finally, I looked him in the eye and said, "I like you too. I've just been a coward about it." Lucas grinned, relief flooding his face. Good, because I was starting to think I was the only crazy one. We laughed, the tension breaking like a wave. And then, almost without thinking, I reached over and took his hand. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. From there, everything shifted. The next few weeks were full of firsts. First date, first kiss, first time spending the night. And the best part, we never lost the easy friendship underneath it all. If anything, it made us stronger. One night, a few weeks after we officially started dating, Lucas invited me to his place to look at the photos he'd taken so far. He spread them out on the table, each one more beautiful than the last. And there I was, laughing, thoughtful, genuine. "These are amazing," I said, running my fingers over a shot where I was caught mid-laugh, hair tousled, and eyes bright. "Not as amazing as you," he said, eyes locking with mine. It felt like everything was falling into place, like the story Lucas had seen in me was finally being told, not just in pictures, but in the moments we shared. Looking back, I never would have guessed that a simple request to test out a camera would lead to this. To us. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. After that night at Lucas's place, looking through the photos we'd taken, things started to feel like they were speeding up in a way I hadn't expected. Not in a bad way, more like the kind of momentum you get when you realize something you've been avoiding is finally catching up with you. And maybe, just maybe, it's exactly what you needed. Lucas and I settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. We still spent hours together, talking about everything and nothing, but now there were touches that lingered a little longer, quiet moments where our eyes met and neither of us looked away. I caught myself watching him more, noticing the way his smile crinkled the corners of his eyes, or how his laugh was that kind of genuine that made you want to hear it over and over. One evening, about a week after we'd started officially calling it us, Lucas invited me to a gallery opening downtown. A friend of his had some photography on display, and Lucas said it'd be a good chance for me to see what inspired him. I wasn't sure how I felt about being out in public like that. As a couple, I mean. But I didn't want to back out. So there we were, walking into this crowded space filled with strangers, the buzz of voices, and the hum of soft music wrapping around us like a blanket. Lucas had his hand in mine, and it was the first time I felt brave enough to hold it openly, without hiding or second-guessing. As we made our way through the exhibits, Lucas kept pulling me toward images that stood out to him, shots of city streets at night, candid portraits, quiet moments caught between strangers. At one point, he stopped in front of a black and white photo of a guy sitting alone on a park bench, the light catching just right to make his face look both tired and hopeful. "That one reminds me of you," Lucas said quietly. I looked at the picture, then back at him, my stomach doing that familiar twist. "Why's that?" He shrugged, but his eyes held that same intensity. "Maybe because it's real. Not perfect, but honest. Like you." I felt my cheeks heat up, but I didn't pull away. Later, as the gallery started to empty and the night grew quieter, Lucas led me outside. The cool air was a relief after the stuffy room, and we stood there under the glow of the streetlights, the city alive around us but somehow feeling like it was just us. He looked at me then, that way again, the way that made my heart skip. "I've been thinking a lot about what comes next," he said. "Not just the photos, or us, but everything." I swallowed, wondering if I was ready to hear what that meant. "I don't want this to be just a phase or something casual," he continued. "I want to build something real. With you, The words hit me harder than I expected, because I'd been scared before. Scared of losing our friendship, scared of what people might say, scared of what it meant for us. But hearing him say it out loud made me realize I wanted the same thing. I want that too, I admitted, more than I thought I did. He smiled, and suddenly the city felt less overwhelming, like maybe we could carve out our own little space in all of this chaos. Over the next few weeks, we started spending even more time together. Sometimes it was as simple as cooking dinner at my place or binge-watching terrible movies. Other times we'd go on spontaneous photo walks, Lucas capturing moments while I tried to keep up. One Saturday, we decided to tackle a project Lucas had been dreaming about, a photo series exploring the city's hidden corners. We wandered through alleys, graffiti-covered walls, quiet parks, and bustling markets. Between shots, we talked about our dreams, our fears, and the weird twists life had thrown our way. At one point, we ended up sitting on the steps of an old library, the sun setting behind us and painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Lucas pulled out his camera, but this time, instead of asking me to pose, he just held it and looked at me with that familiar intensity. "No more photos," he said softly. "Just us." I leaned into his side, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Sounds perfect." That evening, as we walked back to my apartment, hand in hand, I realized how much had changed, from an awkward photo shoot in my living room to something that felt like the start of forever. And even though I didn't know exactly where this path would lead, I was ready to find out. With Lucas by my side, every moment felt like its own kind of story worth telling. The days that followed felt like we were moving in this quiet, unspoken dance. One step forward, a glance back, but every movement pulling us closer. We were still figuring things out, trying to balance what was new and thrilling with what felt safe and familiar. I think that's the hardest part, honestly. When everything changes but also feels the same and you're not sure how to hold on to both. One afternoon, Lucas texted me out of the blue. "Got a surprise planned. Free tonight?" I was sitting at my desk, scrolling through emails, and the message made me sit up straighter. I replied with a quick, "Absolutely," and started wondering what kind of surprise he had in mind. When I got to his place later that evening, he was waiting with that shy, excited grin. "Ready?" he asked, camera bag slung over his shoulder. "Lead the way," I said. We drove out of the city, windows down, cool night air rushing in. Lucas had put on this playlist of old jazz and indie tunes, the kind of music that felt like a secret soundtrack just for us. The streets gave way to quieter roads lined with trees, and I felt the tension of the week start to melt. After about 30 minutes, we pulled up to this old, abandoned building, an old factory or warehouse or something. It was the kind of place that looked like it had stories carved into every cracked brick and broken window. Lucas turned to me, eyes bright. "I wanted to shoot here. It's raw, real, and I think it fits the story I want to tell." I looked around, the place oddly beautiful in its decay. The setting sun threw golden light through shattered panes, dust motes dancing in the beams. It felt like stepping into a forgotten world. He set up his gear while I watched, his focused expression making my chest tighten in that familiar way. When he finally looked at me and said, "Okay, you ready?" I realized this was more than just a casual shoot. This was him inviting me into his world, into something deeper. I stepped forward, and he started snapping photos, but it wasn't the usual stiff poses. He had me walking through broken doorways, leaning against rusted metal, even sitting on a crumbling staircase. Between shots, we talked about the history of the place, but mostly, it was just us, moving together through this strange, beautiful space. At one point, Lucas lowered the camera and caught me looking at him. "Hey," he said softly, "you're killing it." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Only because I've got the best photographer." He laughed, but didn't take his eyes off me. Then, out of nowhere, he reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear. The touch was electric, and suddenly I was acutely aware of how close we were. "Lucas," I started, unsure what to say. He leaned in a little, voice low. "I don't want this to end." Neither did I. We stayed there until the light faded, the city lights blinking on in the distance. On the drive back, the car was quiet except for the music and the hum of the engine. I reached over and took his hand, and this time, He didn't pull away. That night, back at my place, we sat on the couch, both exhausted but unwilling to let the night end. Lucas pulled out his camera and showed me some of the shots, raw, gritty, intimate. And in every one, there was this undeniable feeling of us, caught in between decay and light. "I think this is my favorite shoot yet," he said, voice soft. "Mine too," I admitted. Then came the moment where everything shifted again. Lucas looked at me with those eyes, steady, open, vulnerable. "I want to meet your family," he said quietly. My stomach did another flip. I hadn't told my parents about us yet. I'd been avoiding it, unsure how they'd react. But hearing Lucas say it so matter-of-factly hit me harder than I expected. "Are you sure?" I asked, heart pounding. He nodded. "I want to be part of your life, all parts." That night, lying next to him, fingers tangled, I thought about what that meant, about how far we'd come. From that awkward first shoot in my living room to this, building something real, something worth fighting for. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Not just about us, but about the story we were writing together. Messy, complicated, but ours. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I was ready to find out. With Lucas. With the camera. With the moments in between, waiting to be captured. The idea of introducing Lucas to my family felt like this massive looming thing, and not just because I was nervous about their reaction. It was more that this step made everything feel so official, so real. Like, I couldn't hide behind the just friends excuse anymore. But Lucas, with that quiet confidence of his, made me feel like I could do it, that whatever happened, we'd handle it together. The weekend before the visit, we spent a lot of time just talking. Lucas wanted to know everything. My parents, quirks, what kind of person they were, how I thought they'd react. I tried to be honest, but also protective. I wasn't sure how much to prepare him for. "Just be yourself," I told him. "They love me, but you should know. They're old school in some ways. Might take some time to warm up." He nodded, his fingers tracing patterns on the back of his camera case. "I get it. I'll do my best." The day arrived, and holy hell, my nerves were through the roof. I hadn't been back home in a while, and now, with Lucas tagging along, it felt like everything was under a microscope. I kept running through all the possible scenarios in my head, the awkward silences, the questions, the judgment. When we pulled up to my parents' house, I felt my stomach twist. Lucas reached over and squeezed my hand as we walked up the porch steps, and that small gesture settled some of the storm inside me. My parents were exactly as I remembered. Warm smiles, open arms, that faint scent of old books and coffee that made me instantly feel like a kid again. "Lucas, it's so good to finally meet you," my mom said, pulling him into a hug. "We've heard so much." That caught me off guard. I hadn't told them much, but apparently I'd mentioned him enough in passing for them to be curious. Dad shook Lucas's hand firmly, but gave me a knowing look that said, "We're watching you." Classic dad move. Dinner was a mix of delicious home cooking and careful conversation. I was surprised at how easily Lucas slipped into the role of the considerate guest, asking questions about my parents, garden, and sharing stories about his photography adventures. I caught my mom glancing at him, smiling like she was approving of what she saw. But the real moment came after dinner, when we were all sitting in the living room. My dad, who'd been mostly quiet, turned to me and said, "So, is this the guy?" The room went still. I looked at Lucas, and he gave me this small, encouraging nod. "Yeah," I said, voice steady. "This is Lucas." There it was. Simple, honest, and surprisingly easy to say out loud. My dad grunted, then cracked a small smile. "Good. He seems all right." Relief flooded through me, and I laughed. A little too loud, probably, but it felt like a weight had lifted. The tension eased, and for the rest of the evening, things felt normal. Like maybe this was the start of something new, something we could all be a part of. After we left my parents' house, Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at me, eyes shining. "You handled that way better than I expected." I shrugged, grinning. "Guess I'm better at hiding nerves than I thought." He laughed. then pulled me close. I'm proud of you. That moment, simple, genuine, was everything. It was the kind of thing that doesn't always make it into pictures, but is worth more than any shot ever could. Back at my place later that night, we sat on the couch, the city lights glowing through the window. Lucas pulled out his camera but didn't take any pictures. Instead, he just looked at me and said, "I want to keep building this story, us." I nodded, feeling like I'd never been more sure of anything. Me too. We talked late into the night about what we wanted, our hopes, our fears, the messy, imperfect life we were stepping into. And even though the future was uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. Because sometimes the best stories aren't the ones you capture with a camera. They're the ones you live. And this one? It was just getting started. Months passed after that night with my parents, and somehow life settled into this comfortable, steady rhythm. Lucas and I kept shooting, exploring, laughing at all the little things that made us, us. The awkwardness faded, replaced by a quiet understanding that didn't need words. One Sunday morning, I found myself sitting on the fire escape outside my apartment, Lucas beside me, both of us nursing cups of coffee. The city was waking up below, the usual hum of cars and distant chatter filling the air. He pulled out his camera, but instead of aiming it at anything, he just held it loosely between his hands. He said, eyes on the skyline, "I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who'd find someone and just want to build a life with them." I smiled, turning to look at him. "I get that. It's scary, but it feels right." He reached over and took my hand. "You're my favorite story, the one I want to keep telling." My heart tightened, not from surprise, but from how deeply those words settled inside me. All the uncertainty, all the nerves, they didn't disappear overnight, but they didn't matter as much anymore. Because this, us, was real, and that was enough. I squeezed his hand back, feeling the warmth spread. Same here. We sat there for a while, just holding on to that moment. The city, the morning light, the quiet promise between us. Later, as we packed up the camera and headed inside, I realized that sometimes the best pictures aren't the ones you take, but the moments you live. The stories that don't fit in a frame but stay with you, quietly shaping everything that comes next. And with Lucas, I finally felt like my story was exactly where it was supposed to be.